In today's video, I want to talk about my favorite Whirlwind Barbarian build so far here in Diablo 4 and why I am using it. And so this build is a speed-focused version of the Whirlwind Barbarian build that is still focusing on bleeds and two-handed slashing weapons as its primary source of damage. And we'll get into the reasons why I'm still using that over a new popular version that is focusing on a bludgeoning weapon. The entire purpose of this build, as you can see, it's hyper-focused. There's no ultimate here. It's all about movement and constantly getting through each wave of enemies as fast as possible. Made this build because for two things, I'm still 91, I need to get to 100, and then also with all the recent changes, I feel like people coming up that are not necessarily blasting as hard as I am, or people that have already hit level 100, this period of the game is going to be far longer. So having a build that is actually really focused on this aspect of the game, I think is going to be even more valuable going forward. So the entire purpose of this is going to be speed farming dungeons, things that are not as difficult. There's going to be no punching up here. And then also Nightmare Sigils, getting those done as fast as possible because you can crank out the experience way quicker, in my opinion, if you focus on things that are in your range and speed farm it versus trying to punch up and get more experience per attempt in the harder Nightmare Sigils. I would save that for later. That is non-scaling content, so I think pushing the harder versions of that, you might as well wait until you're level 100 to make the biggest punch-up possible. Being able to get as much experience per hour as possible, not only on my character, but on my glyphs. Okay, let's talk about the abilities and the legendaries that I chose. I think this is a good place to start because this build's a little unique. And the whole point of it is just all about movement and making things going from one elite pack to the next as fast as humanly possible. So that is why I got rid of my ultimate. I shouldn't be needing to ultimate to kill packs of enemies that are at my level or below me when I'm doing this. Because as you start to level up, scaling ends up getting a little better in your favor, especially on a 1 minute cooldown. I'm not taking full advantage of it if I'm going to be consistently speed farming. I want something that's all in the same kind of cooldown and giving me more movement so I can get from pack to pack. I like to have the auto attack. You can get better fury generation this way. That was another thing because I was going with leap over this, but I was like, screw it. Let's just get rid of the ultimate that is inconsistent. Let's talk about the legendaries. The reason why I'm going the bleeding build is because, well, first of all, I don't have a good bludgeoning weapon. And so that's a massive DPS loss, so not worth it. But then there's other benefits here. Because we have this, we can get lucky hit procs to happen and lower the cooldown of non-ultimate abilities. So that also has more synergy with not having the ultimate. So then I could be getting more leaps. If we skill this up in enhanced leap, if I don't hit anything, 4-second cooldown reduction. But if I do hit someone, then I get more fury. And then I figured I might as well put the legendary aspect on here to create an earthquake, dealing damage. When you're standing in it, you gain 14% increased damage. Is I could just leap, not hit anyone, get the 4-second cooldown reduction, and then pull people in with this. So it's another win-win. So in every situation, I think Leap is really nice to help move around the map, do more damage. It has good cooldown reduction. Very versatile ability here. To round out the build is basically just as much damage as possible. Every possible scenario, I was trying to go with damage. This is one that I didn't. I have a perfect roll on Disobedience. I like this a ton. I think having a little bit of survivability is totally fine here. So here is the builder. Let's talk about the perfect rolls. So on the headpiece, we're looking for cooldown reduction, and then really nothing too crazy here. We're looking for cooldown reduction, and then I like the whirlwind pull because a big issue with speed farming is if there's other ranged enemies that are kind of kiting away, you don't have to worry about that because you just pull them in with whirlwind and kill them immediately. Then we also have Rage of Harrogath. We already talked about this. And then Gore's Devastating Grips. This is going to help close out elites, stuff like that. When you have that, you release it, it does good damage. Next is going to be the legs. And when it comes to the actual best in slot attributes, I think it's going to make a massive difference in how fast you are killing packs of enemies. So the first one is going to be 4 ranks to your war cry. I'm just focusing on every possible way it can get as much damage as possible. And the next is going to be the 42% potential damage for 6 seconds after killing elite, as you're going to be zooming through the map on Nightmare Sigils and going from pack to pack, or just going from pack to pack on normal dungeons or even open world. Having that 6-second increase of 42% damage is going to be crazy, and you're just going to melt the next pack, and then you can snowball that as you go from killing one elite pack to the next if you're fast enough. Then the next two, I just put damage reduction on both the other things because there's really no other good attributes that are going to make a meaningful difference in your damage, in my opinion. You could technically get ranks of leap here, but not necessary. On the boots, I actually didn't add the legendary aspect. So let's actually do that here. We need, here, let's see. This one right here, movement speed. So there's critical strikes, grant movement speed. We could do this. I like this one here. So when you use your rallying cry, you're going to get an extra 4 seconds of movement speed. So that is going to be the move here. And you also get unstoppable. So if you're, especially when you're doing Nightmare Sigils, this is super good because you can just move through enemies and it makes it easier to get to the objective so you can get that done faster. We have very standard stuff. Here's going to be the main attributes, crit strike damage, vulnerable damage, core skill damage, and damage to close enemies. That is going to be the god roll for stuff like this. And then of course, Whirlwind. We want Dire Whirlwind. This is a no-brainer. Gives you a massive amount of critical strike chance, which is insane for this build. And that's why I like Whirlwind too as a leveling build starting after like level 50, because it's so accessible. If you get a good roll of this, then you get so much crit rate, and builds usually are super starved for crit rate, but the barbarians don't have to worry about that. So then when you want to change to like a Hoda build or a Rupture build down the line, you have this really good build that you can be using to speed farm and get that gear fast, stack up all the god rolls of the other builds you want to try, and then you can transition to them really easily. Let's circle back here to the boots, because this is really important. We want movement speed after killing an elite. We want movement speed flat. This is the most important for the speed build, and then Fury Cost Reduction is just always good. This is normally the top priority when it comes to a barbarian, is going to be the Fury Cost Reduction, but we're trying to go for speed. So we want to have both of those, and then a nice little bonus would be the Shrine Buff Duration. If I didn't talk about it already, the Helm, obviously cooldown reduction, that's going to be the top priority there. The other stuff is just a nice bonus. And then let's go to the Amulet, because the Amulet and the boots are almost identical when it comes to what you want. You obviously want the cooldown reduction. That is going to be top priority. That's always the top priority when it comes to barbarians in general, and this build too. Fury Cost Reduction is always going to be the second best. And then in this case scenario, because we're trying to move fast, we want the movement speed, and we want the movement speed again after killing an elite. That'd be the dream roll for something like this. And then I think having a little bit of survivability in here, I think Disobedience is an amazing thing. I don't want to get rid of my perfect roll just because I want to go fast. Now we got to go with our rings. This is very standard. This is just going to be the general best rings for a barbarian. This section is always pretty standard, like Disobedience on the Amulet, Circle of Echoing Fury on this one, and you have Bold Chieftains on this one when it comes to the legendary affixes. Resource generation is always going to be top priority. Damage as much as possible, crit, strike damage, vulnerable damage are going to be the best. Lastly, we have the two-handed and ancestral sword, and then obviously these are going to be the best attributes to pair with that. Crit, strike damage, vulnerable damage, core, and damage close on the legendary affix. This is the last important part, is going to be the Paragon board. So what I ended up doing is I did the god rolls for the gear, and then I put in the glyph section, I put my actual level so you can kind of get an idea why I put the points here. Because some of them will be like, okay, well, this is a dexterity one, or this is a strength one, but you're missing a couple. Yeah, I'm going to circle back and I'm going to go through and add more strength to be able to get more physical damage. Or a better example would be here, you're leaving dexterity on the table. It's like, well, my exploit is only like level 8. I'm not going to be going through that until later, until I got some of the better points here. And when I go through and get this to 15, then I'm definitely going to be taking some of this other points later. So that's why I didn't do the god roll here when it came to the glyphs. I ended up just doing only the god roll on the affixes on the gear to make it more clear thinking, or where I would want the gear to go if you got the god roll. But in this case scenario, this is helping decide why I made these choices. Let's break down what those choices are. Some things to take note of is normally I just go for the damage to elites, but we're trying to move fast. So I took this one here, movement speed after killing an elite, added this point onto that. As you go through here, there's going to be obvious things to take. Definitely want to get Warbringer, even though we're trying to move fast. I like the extra fortify, and as we're fortified, or I believe over 50% fortified, we gain 12% more damage. Yeah, over 50% of your maximum life, you deal 12% increased damage. So that is another reason why indirectly being fortified is increasing our damage there. It splits, and where we could have invested these points into another board, but I decided to go this route. So you come up here, you can get a ton of vulnerable damage, and I do hit this requirement. I'm not missing this. This is just the limitations of this board or whatever this builder is. A lot of good stuff exists. You need this if you're going to go slashing. So look at all these points here. So we have vulnerable damage again, and more dexterity, but then we have 5% to two-handed slashing weapons, another 5%, another 20% to two-handed slashing when you have the strength requirement, which I do, and then another 5%. So that's crazy. It's 35% there, and another 10% of vulnerable damage. And then you get another 15 physical, and then another, or 20% here when you have it fully leveled up. This is an insane boost to the damage that I think far outweighs going another round and barely hitting another Paragon board with a glyph. And then as I get more Paragon points, then definitely I would go and drop something here and build another board probably, but I haven't made that choice yet. This is just purely for the most optimal use of the Paragon points that I have currently at the moment. And then as I level these up and as I level the glyphs up, I'm going to circle back and start placing these in. And then keep in mind, I haven't done my renown. I don't have the 20 points of Paragon that I normally would have in this case scenario. The decisions that I made for this board, I think these are important. I find this stuff interesting. I always go to people's guides and want to look at how they did their Paragon board because it makes such a massive difference. But hopefully it wasn't too boring for you guys. So that is basically it when it comes to this build. Hopefully it helps you guys. And with that, guys, I am out of here. Peace.